Let's go ahead and get started. And as we go along, if you have any questions, just feel free to plug them in the chat, or anytime there's a pause, you can just kind of cut in and with your mic, and I don't mind chatting back and forth with you. So we can keep this pretty informal. But we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome. This is an introduction to Creative Commons. My name is Joe Askins. I am the head of instructional services here at Ellis Library on the Columbia campus. And this is a workshop that we have offered on and off throughout the years, and really started offering it more often, I think, once the university was starting to get involved with things like open educational resources. So trying to get faculty to adopt and use and even create their own educational materials like textbooks and other things that might carry a Creative Commons license. So we would spend some time focusing on that in either our presentations about OER, or we would have sort of standalone presentations like this. I work as a part of my job, I work with our kind of OER outreach. So I'm talking with faculty, providing them guidance on how to find freely available materials that they can integrate into their class, and what sorts of rights they do and don't have with regards to how they might want to, say, alter or customize things that they find to be able to use in their class. So if they find an open textbook that kind of gets 75% of the way there, but they need to kind of make some tweaks to make it a little bit more relevant for their class, I can kind of guide them through looking at how that textbook was licensed, let them know a little bit about what they can and can't do on their own, and then how they give credit back to earlier authors and so on. I this past year completed the Creative Commons certification course for librarians. So spent a lot of time over the spring and summer doing a lot of studying on sort of the history of Creative Commons licensing and on copyright law and how all of these things work. So a lot of that's still up here, and if I can't answer your questions, I usually know where to look. So yeah. So today, what I'm going to focus on are kind of these 5 points. What are CC licenses? What do we mean when we talk about Creative Commons? What are these things? How do they work? You probably have some notion that Creative Commons has something to do with copyright, but how do Creative Commons licenses and copyright kind of work together? What are the different flavors of CC licenses? There are 6 different Creative Commons licenses that people can use and that you might encounter out in the open. And so I'll talk a little bit about what those are and how they work and the differences between them, when you might want to use one, when you might want to use another, and what you as a user can or can't do with an item that has a particular CC license on it. I'm going to talk a little bit about what the process of applying a license to works involves. So if you have something that you've created and you want to apply an open license on it so that other people could use it, what does that look like? What does that process entail? And then finally, how can you go about finding CC license material out in the wild? So hopefully we'll touch on all of those before the end of the hour. And then if you have questions near the end, I can answer some of those as well. So I want to start off here by just kind of having you imagine a scenario. Here's a photo that I took the other day with my phone of my kids out trick-or-treating in downtown Columbia. And so I'm going to use this as an example. Let's say, for example, you posted a photo of your family to your personal website, or to a social media account, or to, if you have a Flickr account or some sort of online photo gallery. Let's say you upload a photo to that, and it is viewable and discoverable by the public. People out there in the real world somehow, some way, might stumble across this image. Think for a moment about under which circumstances would you be okay with a newspaper, or an ad company, a marketing company, or an artist, a visual artist, or just a complete stranger who you've never met and you will never hear from. Under what circumstances would you be okay with that person using your image without contacting you first? What kinds of permissions would you be willing to grant to anybody out there in the wild in advance regarding the use of your photo? And what types of restrictions or protections for reuse would you like to keep in place? Chances are, as you think through that, if we were to sit here and open things up and have all of you comment on what you would or wouldn't feel comfortable with, your answers are probably going to vary. And that's going to depend a little bit on the nature of the creative work in question. In this case, this is a photo of my children. It could depend on things like what your intentions are for that creative work long term. Is this something that you would intend or expect to be able to monetize? Do you think that it has a lasting commercial value that you might want to exploit? So some of your possible responses as you're thinking through that might be things like, I don't care if other people use the photo as long as they are just giving me proper credit for the work. So basically just attributing that work to you, saying that this photo was taken by Joe Askins. Some of you might say, I don't mind with other people using that photo as long as they aren't trying to turn a profit off of it. So basically, is it okay for others to use your creative works as long as they aren't trying to sell those materials and pocket the money from those sales? Maybe you'll say, I don't mind others using my photo as long as they aren't making any substantial changes to my work. So maybe I don't really have a say or a feeling one way or another on whether or not people are going to try to make money off of my photo, but I don't want them going in and photoshopping my children and making changes to that photo that would in some way change the integrity of my creative work. Or maybe you might say, I don't mind others using the photo just as long as whatever they do with it, they end up making available so other people can then take it and do things with it as well. Depending on, again, what the work is, the amount of time you put into that creative work, and what your long-term intentions are, your feelings, your gut reaction might fall closer to one or the other, one of these four, potentially. Now, flip it around. Let's say you were not the person that took the photo, but let's say you are the person working for that newspaper or working for that ad agency, or you are that visual artist and you are searching around online, you're skimming through social media, and you stumble across this photo. And you decide, hey, I like that picture. That would be really great for a little ad that I'm creating. Or maybe I would like to do something fun with that picture. Maybe change it up, throw it into Photoshop, change the work, tweak the colors. Maybe I'd like to create a painting based on this photo. What are your options as the potential user? If you think about it, your options might be, I should probably call up the photographer and ask for permission. Maybe you want to get written permission. Maybe you just want verbal permission, but you may think, I need to contact this person and get the okay before I start using it. If you were planning on using the work in a slideshow for a class, for teaching purposes, or for a presentation or an assignment, you might think, I'm creating this presentation for an educational use, and I think the use of the image would probably be allowed under fair use. So I'll just go ahead and use it. I'm not going to bother the person. I'm not going to seek permission. I'm not trying to profit off of it. I'm just going to download the image and throw it in there. Nobody will be the wiser and I'll be fine. Maybe you'll just think, this person's never going to know, so I'm just going to go ahead and do it. Who cares about fair use or about what context, whether I'm in a class or not? I'm just going to go ahead and do it because the chances of this person finding out, they'll never know. Or you might think, I have no idea whether or not this person is okay with me using this image or not. So maybe I just need to walk away. So again, depending on who you are, depending what your circumstances are, your sort of instant gut reaction might be one of these four or somewhere in between. And what this really gets down to are sort of, both on the creator end and the user end, this sort of if only wish. As a creator, if only there were a way that I could tell everybody out in the world without having them call me on the phone or send me an email every time they wanted to use my image. If only there were a way that I could communicate to everybody in advance, right up front, here are my intentions and expectations about this photograph. Here are the ways in which you can use it. Don't bother me, just go ahead and do it. Here are the ways you can use it. And here are the things that I'm not okay with you doing with it. And then as a user, you're thinking, if only there were a way that I could know what this photographer's intentions and expectations are, so I know whether or not I have the right to use it. So it's basically kind of about not having to bother one another and being able to make those intentions clear at the outset when the image is published. And so that's what a Creative Commons license effectively does. It effectively tries to make life easier for both creators and users by stating as clearly as possible, here are the ways in which a user can use the creation, somebody else's creation. And so I want to talk a little bit about what Creative Commons is, because there are at least 3 different ways in which the term can be used. And really, I'm going to be focusing on one of those ways. But I do want you to be a little bit aware of the other ways in which you might encounter the term. The way that I'm going to use Creative Commons, the term, is usually going to be in the context of talking about the licenses, the actual language that you would apply, append, affix to a creative work that is your statement of your intention to other users about what they can or can't do with a work. There are 6, as I said, 6 Creative Commons licenses that facilitate the sharing and use of creative works. They give everyone from individual creators all the way up to large institutions and companies one standardized way to grant the public the permission to use creative work. And these licenses are designed to work within sort of the context and construct of current US copyright law. So these are not creating new laws. These are effectively interpretations and statements built around existing copyright law. So throughout the rest of this presentation, when I'm talking about Creative Commons, usually I'm talking about the licenses themselves. And again, license, all that means is a statement of permission. And from the user's perspective, a Creative Commons license on a work basically just answers the question, what can I do with this work right now without talking to its creator? What can I do with that photo of those kids trick-or-treating? How can I use it? What can I do to the image? Who can I share it with without having to call up the photographer and negotiate those permissions one-on-one? Now, we also can think about the Creative Commons as being this big body of work. So when you hear that word commons and you think, okay, well, we're talking about the whole collection of material that's openly and freely available out there in the world, and all of the people who are producing openly licensed content. And that isn't an incorrect use of that term, but it is one that you find less frequently. It's one that I'm not going to use quite as much here in this presentation. But in the broadest sense, the Creative Commons is that full collection of creative works that have been published with open licenses like Creative Commons licenses and made available for reuse. Creative Commons licenses came about in the digital age, as my last slide said, but they don't apply only to digital materials. So while you will often find them on online content, such as images or videos, PDFs, websites, things like that, you can apply a Creative Commons license still to something that is published in print, and that's okay. So here are 3 examples. These are 3 images that are all available with for reuse through Creative Commons licenses, and I can explain where I found those in a moment. But they're also three different forms of media, or they're representing three different forms of media that have Creative Commons licenses. This first picture here, you see a person holding a sociology textbook. This is a textbook that was written by a variety of sociology faculty throughout the United States and published by the OpenStax Foundation, which is a publishing unit operating out of Rice University. And OpenStax publishes freely available textbooks that anybody can use. And these textbooks, these OpenStax textbooks, are often used at colleges and universities across the US. And so this is an actual physical copy of that textbook. The PDF of that textbook is freely available. You can go online right now and you can download a PDF of that. You would have the right to print that out and use that as your textbook. You would have the right to share, if you were a sociology professor, you could share that textbook or chapters of it with your students at no cost. And then but at the same time, you could also purchase a physical copy at low cost as well. This photo itself is licensed with a Creative Commons license. And it's something that I found online, and it had a Creative Commons license. So I was allowed to reuse this photo for my own purposes in this presentation. So you have kind of two different examples, both the book in the picture and then the picture itself, both being openly licensed. This image in the middle is the cover art for an album by the band 9 Inch Nails. Trent Reznor had, starting in the mid-2000s, started applying Creative Commons licenses to his new albums as he was releasing them, because he wanted to encourage his listeners to take the music on the CD or later on in digital format and be able to have the freedom to remix those songs and share those songs with one another without having to obtain permission from either him or from his publisher. So he was able to apply a Creative Commons license to the album itself. And that license essentially stipulated that people could essentially do whatever they wanted with the album and with the music on the CD or in the MP3 format or whichever format they received it, as long as they weren't trying to turn around and then sell their versions of the songs. They would have to share them out for free. They could not turn a profit on their versions. And that if they did make changes and share them out with other people, that they had to be okay with other people then taking those versions and then doing more things with them. So it had both a non-commercial element to that license, but also what we call share alike, which is that idea of continuing this sharing on so that people could continue to take new versions and then do their own thing with them. And then finally, just this image of this corgi here, that is just an example of an image that somebody took and posted up online and applied a Creative Commons license to it because they were fine with anybody finding it and using it for their own purposes. In my case, I'm going to put it in a slide deck. Somebody else might want to, print it out and frame it, or perhaps print it out and sell it. So that person had no problems with other people doing that. And as of this spring, there have been an estimated 2 billion items or pieces of work that have been licensed under some kind of Creative Commons license, according to the Creative Commons organization. So a lot of people are using this. And then finally, I mentioned that organization. Creative Commons is also a nonprofit organization. It is an actual group of attorneys and advocates and copyright experts who work together and who have been working together now for 20 years to help develop this language that we use, these licenses that we use, and who can provide guidance and who also conduct a lot of outreach trying to promote the idea of using Creative Commons licenses. So they develop and revise these licenses, and they also do a lot of programming and training and education about how to use these things. And they also do a lot of work in a lot of developing countries and in the global South, where you find that a lot of because of just the economic differences in countries, there is a great need for freely available materials and materials that can be shared and revised in different ways to meet the needs of local populations. So I'm going to stop there for a second, because I'm going to start getting into talking about what these licenses look like. But I did want to stop for a moment and find out, is there anything that anybody has a question about that I've discussed up to this point? I will wait just a couple of seconds here.
Hey, Joe, this is Phil. Are you going to cover the 6 types and how we would, okay, thanks.
Yeah. So that's the next part here. So that's I'm going to talk about copyright, and then I'm going to get into the 6 types. All right, so I'm going to move on, and feel free to save your questions for our next break or till the end. So some notes on copyright. As I said, Creative Commons licenses don't create new copyright law. They are actually just licenses that are designed to work with existing copyright law. I'm not going to get into dive deeply into copyright here, but it is important to remember what copyright in the US does entail, or when copyright goes into effect. And so according to the US Code, copyright protection subsists in original works of authorship fixed in a tangible medium of expression. That's important to know. The copyright begins at the moment in which an expression is actually fixed in some sort of form. You can't copyright an idea, but the moment that that idea is expressed in some sort of media, that is the moment in which you as a creator gain the copyright, or gain ownership over that item. Your exclusive rights as a creator. You have exclusive rights under US law for the items that for the materials that you create. You have the exclusive right to reproduce that work, so to make copies of it. You have the right to prepare derivative works, so making changes to those works, making variations of those works. You have that exclusive right. You have the right to distribute the work, either by sale or to transfer the ownership, to give the work, to grant ownership to somebody else. You have the right to perform the work. You have the right to display the work. And then you have the right to broadcast the work. All of those things by default are your right, and your right alone, unless you are working in interesting situations like work for hire, or if you are sharing, if you are a co-creator. But in general, if you are working on your own, if you're creating something in your own time, these are rights that you have. And for anybody else to be able to do anything with your work, they have to have some sort of permission from you in order to be able to do this. So if somebody wants to be able to create copies of your work and sell or distribute those copies, they have to negotiate that with you. If they want to make their own version that is based on yours, if they want to translate, if they want to just rewrite your story, then they have to negotiate that with you. And copyright goes into effect the moment, as I said, the moment that it's created and fixed in a tangible form. And copyright is one of those things that people tend to think, well, I have to register my work. No, you don't. You don't have to stick your work in an envelope and mail it to your self-certified mail in order to have copyright. Copyright, you gain copyright to your own creative works the moment that is created. Now, there are rules and best practices regarding when you need to register materials. And one of the things is if you wanted to bring a lawsuit against somebody, then you would need to register your intellectual property, your created work, with the Copyright Office. But you do not have to fill out a form and go to the Copyright Office for copyright to be granted to you. It just comes into being the moment that you create a work in a fixed and tangible form. So sometime around these presentations, sometimes I've had people ask, or I've had people ask later on, why would I want to make my creations available for reuse? Why, if I've done all this work, if I've written a story, if I've recorded a song, if I've made a painting, why would I just want to make it freely available for anybody to do with, and for me perhaps never to even know who's using and reusing or altering or even selling my work? And again, your answers may vary. Some people are okay with it. Maybe you want more people to see your work, and all you really want is the recognition of being the person that has created something. You're not perhaps motivated by profit. You're not intending to sell things and make a living off of your creation. You're more interested in just having other people see it, more eyeballs on your work. Maybe you want to see what other people can do with your work. You want to create something and then you want to share it out into the world and see who's going to take the ball and run with it and do something else with it, create something new based on sort of the seed that you've given them. Maybe you've based your work on other people's creations already, and you just want to keep that creative cycle going. I've taken this person's picture, I've made some changes to it, I'm going to put it out there, and then I want to see what everybody else does by it. And then again, maybe you don't want any of those things to happen, and you want to be able to reserve all your rights, and you don't want anybody doing anything with your creation unless they've come and talked to you first. And that's okay. It's really, as I said before, it's going to depend on what your priorities are. It depends on what your values are, and it depends on the specifics of the work. You know, maybe for a picture that I snapped really quickly, I don't care about. Maybe a painting that I worked a long time on, I'm a little more protective of that. It's going to differ from person to person. So let's get into the licenses. Those 6 licenses have 4 attributes that you'll find in different combinations. First one, and the one that you will find across all licenses, is attribution. And that kind of makes sense if you think about it, that at the end of the day, at the very least, if you're going to let other people go in and make changes to your work, share your work, create copies that they're going to sell for a profit, whatever they're going to do, at the very least, you probably at least want to get some sort of credit for the work that you did. And so CC licenses always will ask users to give the creator appropriate credit, which says, Joe Askins was the person that shot that photo. Here's a link to the original photo. And if you've made any changes, kind of explain what changes you made. And so what you'll find across those 6 licenses is they will always have that by in them, CCBY, CCBY SA, and so on. That by means that users have to give credit where it's due by saying, here is the person who created the original version of this work. Share alike. Share alike is an interesting one that kind of comes from the world of open software development. If you think about people who do programming and create new programs and are doing that in an open environment, one person may make the first version of a program and then make the code available to all sorts of other coders and programmers out in the world. And those people can take that code and they can find errors and bugs and make changes, or they can make improvements on that code. And since this is a communal project, you would expect that then those people would then make their versions available out to the same community for other people to keep on revising and tweaking and improving. So that's this continual process. I'm going to create a version, make it available to everybody else. Somebody's going to take that, build off of it, and make it available. And that way it's never locked down. Everybody has the chance to use it, and they're going to continue sharing out their changes, their new discoveries with the community. So that's what share like says. It basically says if you remix or transform or change my photo, then basically if you share it out to the rest of the world, you have to be willing to let other people make changes to your version as well. Non-commercial is pretty straightforward, although there are some interesting wrinkles when you start getting into court cases and things, but non-commercial essentially says you can't use the material for commercial purposes. So I might say you're okay using the photo of my kids, but I don't want you going and selling copies of it and pocketing the money. You can give away photos, you can use it for free, but you cannot turn a profit. And then no derivatives means that if you plan on distributing your, if you want to make changes, you have to keep the changed item to yourself, and you cannot share out an altered version of the original image. So I'm fine with you taking my photo and doing what you want with it, but if you're going to share out the photo, if you're going to distribute the photo, post it on your website, whatever, you cannot go in and Photoshop my kids in the picture. So it's basically, you can share the version as it originally existed, but you can't make any alterations to it. So you take those four: attribution, share alike, non-commercial, and no derivatives, and those turn into 6 different licenses. CC BY, this is sort of the standard, the most permissive version of the Creative Commons license that basically says you can use this item so long as you give me attribution. And so you'll see CC BY on a lot of things. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. It allows for commercial use. It's basically the creator saying, do what you will, just make sure you give me credit for the original version. CC BY SA means you can do that. I don't care what you do with it. Just make sure you give me credit, and make sure that if you post your version out there to the world, that you allow other people to make changes to yours as well. CC BY NC, I don't care what you do with my image, just give me credit, but also I don't want you making money off of your version. All of those together, BY, NC, and SA. You can kind of think through all of this. Give me credit, don't try to turn a profit, and make sure that your version is just as available to other people to use and remix as they want as mine was. No derivatives. So CC BY no derivatives means that you can share out and use my unadapted photo as long as you give me credit and as long as you aren't making changes to it. And then that final one, CC BY NC Indy, means you can't make money off of it, you can't change it, you can give me credit. CC BY NC Indy basically means that it is free to distribute, but you can't alter it. So if I wrote a novel and I wanted to make sure nobody was going to make changes to the final chapter, I could share it out, CC BY NC Indy. Anybody could share the PDF of that book. Anybody would be able to read it for free, but I would be the only person who could ever sell it for a profit. And I would make, and this would help make sure that nobody would make changes to the content of the book. So those are the 6 licenses. I know that I sped through them really quickly, but I also didn't want to spend too much time focusing on the details, because I wanted you to just kind of get the sense of how these things come together. And that really is that combination of, in each case, making sure that there is that attribution element, making sure that we are saying, here's who the original creator was. And then you have these other 3 items that kind of go together in different combinations that have to do with making money, with making changes, and with sharing out new versions. So if you were to do this, if you had created an item, how do you choose a license? The first thing that you can do is you can go to the Creative Commons website, and there's a kind of a wizard there called the license chooser. And this kind of walks you through some of those simple questions. And these are the same types of questions that I asked at the beginning, kind of like, are you okay with people changing your work? Are you okay with people using your work for their own commercial purpose? And you can go through and you can say yes or no, or yes in certain circumstances. And depending on what you select, the website's going to recommend the license that you should use. And then once you can do that, you can copy and paste a statement to apply to your item. There's HTML code that you can embed into your website that will display that statement, and so on. So that's really an easy way. If you're not sure, or if you can't remember the combinations, you can use that license chooser tool to be able to choose your license. And then once you've chosen it, applying it is really, it's going to depend on the format of your creation, but typically you are going to display a statement. It's sometimes accompanied by a little logo or graphic that just makes it clear to anybody who comes across it. Here's how this work has been licensed, and here's how people out in the public can use it. So you might not have even noticed as I was going quickly through my initial slide that this slideshow is licensed CC BY SA, which means that anybody who finds and that can access this slide deck is welcome to share it with their friends. They're welcome to download it to their computer. They could host it on their own website. They could go in and they could pull slides out that they wanted to use and integrate those slides into their own slide deck. They could use the same exact slide deck and delete my name and put their own name on here and leave the rest of it as is. All they need to do is to indicate on their version that their version is based on my version. And if they then publish that out on the web for other people to find, they have to they would have to use a share alike license that indicates to the rest of the public that everybody else is free to use their version as well. So that right there is the statement that I've created for this slide deck. And I put it on the front slide, on the very first slide of the slide deck, so that people know up front. And that's kind of a good best practice for using Creative Commons licensing, is try to make it up front, put it on a cover sheet or on the first slide, or alongside an image that you publish, so that people can tell very quickly what they can or can't do with a piece of media. So if we're thinking back to that photo that I took, if I had published this on Flickr or on my web page, or if even I had put it up on my social media account, I could attach a little bit of just even a text license here that gives the item a title, Halloween 2021. It gives the name of the creator, me, so Halloween 2021 by Joe Askins. It's licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution 4.0 international license. You don't need to know what the different version numbers, the 4.0 or the international license, mean, but that is sort of the current up-to-date attribution license created by Creative Commons. And that link, I'm not going to click on the link right now, but if you go into the slides and click on that link, that would take you to the legal description explaining what a user can do with this image. And so that is just my statement. And that is my statement that anybody who sees this photo would be able to see. And then that would explain to them what they can do with that. And so then let's say if somebody runs my photo through the terrible like Photoshop oil painting filter, and they just absolutely love the way that this photo looks, and they want to distribute this or reuse this, or that, you know, they want to, God forbid, print this out and sell it for a profit, they could do that. And what they would need to do to indicate to everybody else out in the world that this is a derivative image, that this is an image that they created based on work that I had made, is to have a statement that looks something like this. So then maybe they would call it Halloween 2021 oil is a derivative of Halloween 2021 by Joe Askins, licensed under da, 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 da. And then they might have another statement saying that they have licensed their own version, this version of the work, under CC BY, and they might have their name there, so that if somebody wanted to come along and create a black and white version of this image, or if they wanted to go through and do even more crazy things with this picture, they would be able to do that too. And so they would be able to know who had made the latest version of this by looking at this, but they would also know who had made the original version. And what I needed to do in here is they could even take it a step further. And if there's a hyperlink there to the original image, it would allow somebody to be able to kind of walk those breadcrumbs back to find the original version if they wanted to. So it's sort of a good practice to be able to direct people back to earlier versions so that they can see how it's changed over time. So how do you find these things? Let's say you're not so worried about licensing your own work, but you want to use CC licensed materials. You want to find licensed images. You want to find licensed videos. There are all sorts of ways you can do it, but a few places that you'll want to look. If you do Google image searches, if you do a search in Google, you take a look at the images tab. One of the things that you can typically do is you can click the tools button, and that will create a drop down here that allows you to filter and refine your search by size, by color, by type, by time. And then you'll usually see this drop down that says usage rights. Usage rights allows you to then filter just to images that come with Creative Commons licenses, so that those images have been published with a Creative Commons license. And then by using that filter, you should see images in your search results that you would then be able to use. You want to be careful with that. You'll want to click through to see the image as it's hosted on its original website to see if you can find that Creative Commons license, especially since you might not be able through Google to see what flavor of license that image has, whether or not it's CC BY or CC BY non-commercial. So you'll want to take a look at that, but that allows you very quickly to be able to start narrowing down your search to just openly licensed materials. Works the same way on YouTube. So when you do a search in YouTube, you search for videos, you get your search results here in the middle of the page, and there's this filters button that has the little icon with different sliders. If you click on that, then you're going to get a drop down, and you can filter by upload date, by duration. You can resort by relevance or view count or upload date and so on. And then down here under features, about halfway down, you'll see the option for Creative Commons. So you can click on that, and what will happen in your search is that your search results will be filtered to only show you items that have been licensed with a CC license by their uploader in YouTube. So you can then take a look at that video, and you'd be able to see under the video's description what type of license it has. You should pay attention when you're reading journal articles and when you're reading books to see if the items that you are reading have any sort of Creative Commons license. More and more journal articles these days, and especially journal articles that are published open access and published in open access journals, or they're made available through institutional repositories, will carry some sort of Creative Commons license. And in fact, it is one of the recommendations for kind of a new global standard for open access publishing, to make sure that journal articles, they're published open access, which means that they're freely available to the public, carry this sort of license to facilitate ease of sharing of the document, so that the person who's reading the article knows that they have the right to repost that article somewhere else, to email the article to somebody, to post it on social media, to share it out on ResearchGate or some of these other academic social networks and so on. So here's an example of a journal article that I was just reading, and then down below on the main cover page right here, you'll see in print, it says this open access article is distributed under the terms of it. This is the CCBY NC SA. I'm not allowed to print out copies of this and sell it to my colleagues. If I made any changes for whatever reason, if I wanted to go in and make alterations to this article, I would have to then, if I posted it online, I would have to allow other people to then do what they wanted to do with the article and so on. But pay close attention to, when you're seeing articles, pay close attention to those, close attention to the colophons and title pages of your books, where copyright information typically would be published, to see if the book has been published with a CC license. Pay attention to footnotes, pay attention to any sort of informational page in publications that you're looking at, to see if the publisher has granted certain permissions in advance. Creative Commons website has a great search here that has, I said that they've identified about 2 billion items. So about 1/4 of those items they have made discoverable or are able to discover through a search that they have created and host on their website at search.creativecommons.org that allows you to search. This is just an image search. And so this allows you, similarly to the Google image search, allows you to go through and search for images. And it even allows you to then go in and apply filters for specific license types. So if you only want to see items that have been licensed CC BY, you could go in and take a look at those that have been licensed CC BY. And what that will do is it'll remove any non-commercial licenses from your search results and so on. So you can use that. So I'm into the frequently asked questions. I'm going to go through these really quickly, and then if there are any questions or things that are confusing, I can try to clarify those at the end here, or we can get into some sort of specific examples if you have any that you want to float by me. Question that often comes up with CC licensing is, am I giving up my ownership by doing this? Am I in some way waiving my rights? And the answer is no. A CC license doesn't affect your status as a copyright holder. If you take a photograph and publish it online with a CC license, you are still the owner of that photograph. What the CC license does is it's stipulating the ways in which the public can use your work. So instead of an all rights reserved situation, what Creative Commons licenses effectively do is they say some rights are reserved. You are granting some rights to the public, you are waiving some rights, but not all. So you still have the right to profit off of your work. Even if you license something CC BY and let people do whatever they wanted to do with it, you would still have the right to sell prints of that photograph. You could still approve or reject uses on a case-by-case basis that weren't addressed by the CC license. So if you had a non-commercial license on a photo and somebody called you up and said, I would really like to use this in my magazine, but I am going to make money off of the sale of that magazine, you and that publisher could still negotiate one-on-one the terms and agreements of allowing them to do that. So you can still negotiate on a case-by-case basis anything that isn't addressed in the CC license. You can pursue legal action against people who violate your rights. So if you license something non-commercial and you catch somebody who is using your items in a way for commercial purposes, you have the right to pursue legal action against that person. And so you still have certain rights as the copyright holder for those works. Another question, does this somehow place my work in the public domain? Sometimes people think, well, I'm making it freely available. Does that mean all of a sudden this is a public domain work? No. The 6 licenses do not place works in the public domain. However, Creative Commons has developed an instrument called CC0. This is kind of an informal 7th license, but they don't really like to lump it in with the others, because what CC0 essentially does is if you apply a CC0 to your work, you're effectively saying, I'm fine with this being in the public domain. Do what you want to do with it. Do anything you want to do with it. If you want to make your own version of it, if you want to make changes to it, go right ahead. You don't even have to give me credit for the original version. So CC0 is out there. It's something that Creative Commons does offer, and they have instructions on how to use it on their website. And that effectively puts an item into the public domain. But these other licenses do not put works into the public domain. And really the only way that a work otherwise enters the public domain, by and large, for individual creators is by getting through the terms set down in current US copyright law about the length of time past the death of a creator. I can't even recount what the actual current copyright law says with the Sonny Bono Act, but effectively there is a time period through which you or your estate holds copyright before an item goes into public domain. And that would still apply in almost all of these cases. Why should I pay attention to these licenses when I plan on only using things that are covered under fair use? So maybe you're only caring about using these types of things for your assignments or for your lectures or for your own educational slides. And you're pretty sure that these things are covered under fair use. So who cares? Why should I look for CC license stuff? I can use anything, right? The answer is that CC license is one of the things they can do is they can take the ambiguity out of those types of questions. Fair use is confusing and fair use is sticky, and fair use is one of those things that in copyright law is not, sort of by design, is not very clearly defined. US copyright law does make allowances for the fair use of copyrighted material, but fair use laws do not say things like you can only use 10% of a book or you can only use X% of an item. It remains very vague, and because of that, if you can find Creative Commons licenses, or if you can license things with Creative Commons licenses, it takes a lot of the confusion or the ambiguity out of the situation, because it makes it very clear to users what uses are and aren't permitted. So you don't have to worry about, does this fall under fair use? Am I going to get dinged for this? Is somebody going to come after me? If you're using CC licensed materials and you're using it the way that the license stipulates, then you should be okay. I found something online. I found an image. I found a song, and I'd like to edit it. I'd like to make a remix of it. I'd like to make my own version of it. Can I just put a CC license on that and then do that? And the answer, of course, is no, you can't. Only a copyright holder can decide whether to apply a CC license to an item. So if you find an item and you're not sure whether it's openly licensed or not, the best thing you can do is contact the creator and ask for permission or ask for clarification as to whether or not they have openly licensed that item. You can encourage that person to publish the work with a CC license so that they can make it clear, but that decision is really up to them. You cannot assign a CC license to somebody else's work. I've made one of my works available with a license, but now I'm having second thoughts. Maybe you applied a CC license to a photo, but you've seen somebody do some terrible things with that item, and now you're having second thoughts and you wish you could just take it back. What can you do? You can always choose to change the license of the item that you have put up, but anybody who's already downloaded it, anybody who's already accessed it, anybody who has a copy that has the old license on it, that person technically can still continue to use that item with that license. The best thing that you can do is stop distributing the material with the old license, distribute it out with a new license, and try to inform the public of that change and ask for them to respect the new license. You could contact somebody if you saw them using a work under an old license and say, hey, FYI, I've kind of changed my mind on this. Could you please not make changes to it anymore? Or could you please follow my new license? And hopefully they will respond. And, you know, people often will be respectful of that. But once you put a CC license on, especially say like an article on a PDF, and then that starts making the rounds and getting sent around, and then you take that off, people aren't going to know. They're going to see the copy that's in front of them. Okay. So we're right at 3:58. I'm fine hanging around here as long as you'd like. I can chat with you for a few minutes if you have any questions, but I wanted to see what you all are interested in. See what you have questions on, what was unclear about the presentation, or what are some examples that I can sort of spell out for you. But that's kind of the real quick presentation here. So yeah.